38-year-old diner waitress Maria Santos was ridiculed by real estate agents and family members for purchasing the completely worthless abandoned saloon in the ghost town of Silver Creek, Montana, that had been empty since 1962 and came with $340,000 in unpaid property taxes, structural damage requiring $480,000 in repairs, and environmental hazards that everyone warned would financially ruin a single mother already drowning in medical debt. But she had no idea that installing new floorboards to meet health department requirements would reveal a hidden presidential time capsule containing classified documents, historical artifacts, and correspondence from President Theodore Roosevelt's administration that the National Archives had been searching for since 1919, transforming a desperate food service worker struggling to pay for her daughter's cancer treatments into the recipient of a $47.8 million federal acquisition offer and exclusive consulting contracts with the Smithsonian Institution's Presidential History Division. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. At 38 years old, Maria Santos was staring at her fourth job termination notice in 14 months, surrounded by medical bills totaling $298,000 from her 9-year-old daughter Sophia's leukemia treatments and specialized care costs. Credit card statements showing $127,000 in debt accumulated while trying to maintain stable housing for a child who required sterile environments and constant medical monitoring, and the crushing realization that her combined income of $28,000 from working at 2 different diners, weekend catering jobs, and cleaning commercial kitchens could no longer cover basic living expenses in Billings, Montana, where their rent had increased from $1,200 to $2,800 monthly due to oil boom gentrification that had transformed their once affordable neighborhood into luxury housing for petroleum industry executives. The morning of September 14, 2023, had begun like every other hopeless day in Maria's increasingly desperate existence, with Sophia's 6:30 a.m. medication routine that included 17 different pills, liquids, and injections that needed to be administered with military precision to maintain the delicate chemical balance that kept her daughter's cancer in remission. The medication schedule that controlled their entire family's daily routine included anti-nausea medications that cost $340 per week, immune system boosters that insurance refused to cover at $180 per injection, and specialized vitamins that needed to be taken at exact 4-hour intervals to prevent dangerous interactions with her chemotherapy protocols. The certified letter that arrived with that day's mail seemed like the universe's final cruel joke. Notification that her recently deceased great-aunt Eleanor had left her a business property in the abandoned town of Silver Creek, Montana, complete with a nightmarish list of legal problems that made the inheritance feel more like a financial death sentence than a gift. The 1880s saloon building at 47 Main Street in Silver Creek came with $340,000 in accumulated property taxes dating back to 1998. Structural violations that had been accumulating since 1987, and a Gallatin County demolition order that required immediate compliance or face criminal charges for property abandonment in a designated historical preservation zone that carried penalties of up to $15,000 per day for non-compliance. The inheritance documents that accompanied the certified letter included a 23-page assessment from the Gallatin County Building Department that detailed structural problems throughout the 2,400-square-foot saloon building, including foundation settling that had created dangerous floor instability, roof damage that had allowed water infiltration for over 30 years, and exterior wall deterioration that had compromised the building's structural integrity to the point where occupancy was prohibited under current safety codes. The building assessment estimated that bringing the structure up to minimum safety standards would require $480,000 in comprehensive renovation work that would need to be completed by certified historical preservation contractors who specialized in frontier-era construction techniques. The divorce that had been finalized 18 months earlier had left Maria with full custody of Sophia, but no financial support from her ex-husband, Tony, who had claimed that caring for a child with cancer was destroying his mental health and had moved to Austin, Texas to avoid child support obligations while leaving behind a trail of unpaid medical bills, pharmacy costs, and insurance deductibles that totaled $67,000 in abandoned family debt. The custody battle that had consumed 14 months of Maria's life had required her to hire family attorney Michelle Rodriguez at $285 per hour, ultimately costing $31,400 in legal fees that had forced her to sell her 2019 Honda Accord and liquidate her retirement savings account that had contained $12,800 in carefully accumulated emergency funds. The legal separation process had revealed the full extent of Tony's financial irresponsibility, including $43,000 in credit card debt that he had accumulated through gambling and excessive spending on recreational activities, while Sophia was undergoing her initial cancer treatment protocols. The divorce settlement had left Maria with responsibility for $89,000 in medical debt that Tony had helped create but refused to pay, while he retained ownership of their joint assets, including a fishing boat, recreational vehicle, and investment. A count that totaled approximately $78,000 in value that he transferred to his brother's name to avoid court-ordered asset division. The custody arrangements that the family court had established required Tony to maintain health insurance coverage for Sophia through his employment benefits, but his decision to quit his job at Western Pipeline Corporation 3 months after the divorce was finalized had eliminated Sophia's primary insurance coverage during a critical phase of her treatment protocol. The insurance termination had occurred during Sophia's maintenance chemotherapy period, forcing Maria to apply for emergency Medicaid coverage that took 6 weeks to approve while accumulating $34,000 in uninsured medical expenses that she became personally responsible for paying through monthly payment plans that consumed 43% of her take-home income. The leukemia diagnosis that had arrived when Sophia was 6 years old had initially seemed manageable with the Children's Oncology Program at Billings Clinic, but the reality of her aggressive treatment protocol and ongoing complications had quickly overwhelmed the capabilities of their insurance coverage and Maria's financial resources. The diagnostic process had required 8 weeks of testing, including bone marrow biopsies, genetic analysis, and specialized imaging studies that cost $47,000 before treatment could even begin, with insurance covering only 62% of the diagnostic costs due to pre-authorization requirements and coverage limitations for pediatric oncology procedures. The specific type of leukemia that Sophia had been diagnosed with was acute lymphoblastic leukemia, with high-risk genetic markers that required an intensive 3-year treatment protocol, including induction chemotherapy, consolidation therapy, and maintenance treatments that would continue until her 9th birthday. The treatment plan, developed by Dr. Patricia Chen at the Billings Clinic Children's Cancer Center, included monthly hospitalizations for high-dose chemotherapy, weekly outpatient treatments, and daily medications that would cost approximately $380,000 over the 3-year treatment period, with insurance coverage varying from 20% to 90%, depending on the specific procedures and medications involved. The cancer treatment costs that consumed every aspect of Maria's financial existence included $200 monthly for chemotherapy sessions that Sophia needed to maintain remission, Specialized medications costing $1,800 per month that insurance classified as investigational, despite being standard protocols at major cancer centers, and frequent hospitalizations for complications that averaged $18,000 per episode when Sophia's immune system was compromised by treatment side effects. The treatment schedule required Sophia to receive intensive therapy every 2 weeks at the Billings Clinic, which was located 180 miles from their apartment, necessitating overnight stays that cost $140 per night for lodging plus meals and transportation. Expenses that averaged $320 per treatment cycle. The specialized nutrition requirements that Sophia's treatment demanded included organic foods that cost 60% more than conventional groceries, immune-boosting supplements that weren't covered by insurance at $340 monthly, and sterile meal preparation protocols that required hospital-grade food safety equipment, including UV sterilizers, HEPA air filters, and specialized food storage containers that had cost $2,800 to purchase and required expensive replacement filters every 6 weeks. The dietary restrictions that Sophia's compromised immune system required eliminated most cost-effective meal options, like bulk cooking, shared meals, and generic food products, forcing Maria to purchase specific brands and preparations that Sophia's digestive system could tolerate without triggering dangerous reactions. The immune system complications that accompanied Sophia's treatment created additional medical expenses, including prophylactic medications to prevent infections that cost $540 monthly, specialized medical equipment for home monitoring, including digital thermometers, pulse oximeters, and blood pressure monitors that had cost $1,400 to purchase, and emergency medical supplies, including injectable medications, sterile bandages, and antibiotic ointments that needed to be maintained in their home medical kit at a cost of $180 monthly for supplies that might never be used but could save Sophia's life during medical emergencies. The housing complications that Sophia's medical condition created included the need for air filtration systems that cost $2,400 to install and $340 monthly to maintain. Frequent deep cleaning with hospital-grade sanitizers that required professional services every 2 weeks at $180 per cleaning, and elimination of potential infection sources including carpet, upholstered furniture, and decorative items that could harbor bacteria or mold that might be fatal to Sophia during periods when her immune system was suppressed by chemotherapy treatments. The apartment modifications that Sophia's medical team required had cost $8,700 to implement and created ongoing maintenance expenses that averaged $420 monthly for specialized cleaning supplies, air filter replacements, and equipment maintenance. The 2-bedroom apartment at Mountain View Estates that they had maintained for 2 years provided Sophia with the sterile environment that her oncology team identified as crucial for preventing infections. But the lease agreement that Maria had signed included restrictions on modifications that had required her to pay $3,400 in deposits and fees for the medical equipment installations and specialized cleaning protocols that Sophia's treatment required. The apartment complex management had initially resisted the medical modifications, requiring documentation from Sophia's medical team and approval from the building's insurance company before allowing the installation of air filtration systems and specialized flooring that could be sanitized to hospital standards. The transportation challenges that affected Maria's ability to maintain employment included a 2014 Ford F-150 with 247,000 miles that required $4,800 in immediate repairs, including engine work, transmission replacement, and brake system restoration to remain reliable for Sophia's twice-weekly medical appointments at Billings Clinic. The vehicle had been Tony's work truck before the divorce, and its mechanical condition reflected years of neglect and heavy use that had created ongoing reliability problems, including frequent breakdowns that had caused Maria to miss work appointments and Sophia to miss medical treatments when alternative transportation wasn't available. The automotive repair costs that threatened their transportation security included transmission problems that created shifting failures during Montana's mountainous terrain, potentially creating safety hazards while transporting Sophia to time-sensitive medical appointments that couldn't be rescheduled without disrupting her treatment protocol. The repair estimate from Rocky Mountain Auto Service included $2,100 for transmission rebuild, $1,400 for engine repair, and $1,300 for brake system replacement that were required for Montana's annual emissions testing and safety inspection that determined whether the vehicle could legally remain on public roads. The public transportation limitations in rural Montana made vehicle ownership essential for accessing Sophia's specialized medical services, which were distributed throughout the state rather than concentrated in Billings, where reliable bus or train service might have provided alternative transportation options. The medical appointment schedule that Sophia's treatment required included twice-weekly chemotherapy sessions, monthly specialist consultations, quarterly imaging studies, and emergency visits that could occur at any time, day or night, making transportation reliability a matter of life and death importance for maintaining Sophia's treatment protocol and preventing dangerous delays in her medical care. The employment instability that characterized Maria's work life was directly related to Sophia's unpredictable medical needs, which required her to leave work immediately when complications arose or when treatment side effects required emergency hospital visits that could last several days, while Sophia received intensive monitoring and treatment adjustments. The severe reactions that occurred when Sophia's immune system was compromised by chemotherapy could develop within hours and required Maria's immediate presence to advocate for appropriate medical responses, coordinate care between multiple specialists, and provide emotional support during frightening medical emergencies that Sophia couldn't understand or cope with independently. The first diner job that Maria had lost at Prairie Rose Cafe occurred when she missed 23 shifts in 4 months due to Sophia's hospitalization for pneumonia that had developed into a life-threatening infection requiring 6 weeks of intensive antibiotic treatment and immune system monitoring. The restaurant's breakfast and lunch rush demanded consistent staffing for food preparation and customer service, making Maria's scheduling conflicts incompatible with business operations that depended on reliable coverage during peak hours when the kitchen was preparing hundreds of meals for oil field workers and truckers who demanded fast, consistent service. The restaurant manager, Patricia McKenzie, had been initially understanding about Maria's family situation, but had explained during their termination meeting that the restaurant couldn't continue operating short-staffed during their busiest periods when Maria's absences forced other employees to work mandatory overtime and created service delays that were driving away regular customers. The termination had eliminated Maria's primary source of income during Sophia's hospitalization, creating a financial crisis that had forced her to apply for emergency assistance programs and borrow money from relatives who were already struggling with their own financial obligations. The second employment termination at Hometown Family Restaurant had resulted from Maria's inability to work evening shifts that conflicted with Sophia's medication schedule and bedtime routine that needed to be strictly maintained to support her treatment effectiveness and immune system recovery. The restaurant operated with split shifts that required employees to work either morning shifts serving breakfast and lunch customers or evening shifts serving dinner and late-night customers. But Sophia's medical routine required Maria to be home every evening to administer medications, monitor for side effects, and provide emotional support during the difficult recovery periods that followed each chemotherapy treatment. The restaurant's evening shift manager, Robert Chen, had attempted to accommodate Maria's scheduling needs by offering her consistent morning shifts, but the restaurant's staffing structure required all employees to maintain availability for both shifts to cover for sick employees and handle busy periods when customer volume exceeded normal expectations. The termination had occurred during a particularly difficult period, when Sophia was experiencing severe nausea and fatigue from a new chemotherapy protocol, leaving Maria unable to work any shifts for 3 consecutive weeks while Sophia required constant monitoring and medical supervision at home. The current waitressing position at Copper Creek Diner was threatened by similar scheduling conflicts, with manager Patricia Wilson growing increasingly frustrated by Maria's requests for schedule changes to accommodate Sophia's medical appointments, treatment side effects, and emergency hospital visits that could occur without warning during any phase of her treatment cycle. The job provided $11.75 per hour, plus tips for breakfast and lunch shifts that typically generated $140 to $180 in daily earnings. But the income was insufficient for their family's medical expenses, even when Maria could work 40-hour weeks. Without interruption for Sophia's medical needs, the diner's customer base consisted primarily of construction workers, truck drivers, and local farmers who appreciated consistent service and familiar faces, making Maria's frequent absences particularly disruptive to business operations that depended on building relationships with regular customers who expected their usual servers to remember their preferences and provide efficient service. The tip income that provided the majority of Maria's earnings was directly related to customer satisfaction and relationship building, making her attendance inconsistencies particularly damaging to her earning potential, even when she was able to work scheduled shifts. The weekend catering work that Maria pursued through Big Sky Catering provided irregular income ranging from $280 to $520 per weekend, depending on event size and her ability to arrange specialized childcare for Sophia during non-routine activities that might expose her to infection risks or scheduling conflicts with her medication routine. The catering work required Maria to work 12 to 15-hour shifts, serving large events, including weddings, corporate meetings, and community celebrations, leaving her exhausted during weekends when Sophia needed structured activities and parental attention for continued emotional development and medical compliance. The catering assignments that Maria could accept were limited by Sophia's medical schedule and infection prevention requirements, eliminating opportunities for indoor events during flu season, outdoor events during high pollen periods, and any events that required overnight travel or extended time away from their sterile home environment. The scheduling restrictions that Sophia's medical condition imposed had reduced Maria's catering income by approximately 60% compared to other employees who could accept all available assignments. Without medical limitations or childcare constraints, the medical insurance complications that had emerged during Sophia's treatment included coverage denials for essential medications that Blue Cross Blue Shield classified as investigational, despite being FDA-approved treatments recommended by pediatric oncologists at Children's Hospital Colorado and widely used in academic medical centers throughout the United States. The insurance company's coverage policies required extensive pre-authorization documentation, multiple physician consultations, and appeals processes that consumed dozens of hours monthly, while delaying treatments that were time-critical for maintaining Sophia's remission status and preventing disease progression. The insurance appeals process had required Maria to hire medical advocate attorney Jennifer Chang at $350 per hour to fight coverage denials that had reached $89,000 in rejected claims for medications, procedures, and specialist consultations that Sophia's medical team identified as essential for her treatment protocol. The legal fees for insurance disputes had reached $12,600, while generating only partial coverage for some treatments, creating situations where Maria was paying both legal costs and out-of-pocket medical expenses for the same life-saving interventions that should have been covered under their policy terms. The insurance company's denial letters frequently cited lack of medical necessity for treatments that Sophia's oncology team considered standard care, requiring extensive documentation from multiple specialists to prove that denied medications and procedures were essential for preventing treatment failure or life-threatening complications. The appeals process typically required 6 to 12 weeks for resolution, during which time Maria was forced to pay full retail prices for medications that cost up to $4,800 per month, while waiting for insurance decisions that might ultimately deny coverage despite overwhelming medical evidence supporting treatment necessity. The prescription medication costs that weren't covered by insurance included specialized anti-nausea medications that cost $340 per week, but prevented Sophia from becoming dangerously dehydrated during chemotherapy treatments, immune system supplements that cost $180 per month, but reduced her risk of developing life-threatening infections, and pain management medications that cost $520 monthly, but allowed Sophia to maintain normal activities and emotional well-being during treatment periods when pain levels would otherwise prevent her from eating, sleeping, or participating in age-appropriate activities. The diagnostic testing expenses that occurred every 3 months to monitor Sophia's treatment progress and detect any signs of disease progression included blood work that cost $1,400 per visit, imaging studies that cost $300 quarterly, and bone marrow biopsies that cost $800-900 annually, but were essential for determining whether Sophia's treatment was successfully maintaining remission. The testing schedule that Sophia's medical team required generated approximately $34,000 in annual costs that were only partially covered by insurance due to pre-authorization requirements and coverage limitations for pediatric oncology monitoring. Protocols. The specialist consultation fees that Sophia's complex medical condition required included pediatric oncology appointments at $840 per visit, infectious disease consultations at $620 per visit when Sophia developed treatment-related complications, and nutrition specialist appointments at $380 per visit to address eating difficulties and dietary restrictions that affected her growth and development during treatment. The specialist appointments that occurred monthly during active treatment periods generated approximately $18,000 in annual costs that required co-payments ranging from $85 to $340 per visit, depending on the specific provider and insurance coverage. Limitations. The emergency medical expenses that had occurred during Sophia's treatment included 7 hospitalizations for treatment complications that had cost between $12,000 and $34,000 per admission, emergency room visits for fever and infection symptoms that cost $2,800 to $4,200 per visit, and urgent care appointments for treatment side effects that cost $480 to $720 per visit. The emergency medical costs were particularly devastating to Maria's finances because they were unpredictable and often occurred during periods when she was unable to work due to Sophia's hospitalization, creating situations where medical expenses increased dramatically at the same time that income was eliminated. The childcare complications that Sophia's medical condition created included the need for specialized caregivers who understood her medication schedule, infection prevention requirements, and emergency protocols that might be necessary if she developed treatment-related complications. The qualified childcare providers who were trained to handle Sophia's medical needs charged $25 to $35 per hour, compared to $12 to $15 per hour for conventional childcare, making it financially impossible for Maria to arrange childcare that would allow her to work additional hours or accept evening employment that might increase her income. The social isolation that had characterized Maria's personal life since Sophia's diagnosis was intensified by the financial stress that prevented her from participating in parent support groups that charged membership fees, social activities that required childcare expenses, or community events that might expose Sophia to infection risks during periods when her immune system was compromised by treatment. The Childhood Cancer Parent Support Group that met at Billings Clinic provided valuable emotional support and practical information, but the meetings were scheduled during evening hours when Maria needed to be home administering Sophia's medications and monitoring for treatment side effects. The friendship losses that had occurred since Sophia's diagnosis reflected other parents' discomfort with her medical needs and the limitations that her treatment imposed on social activities that required flexibility, spontaneous planning, or exposure to crowds where Sophia might encounter infections that could be life-threatening during chemotherapy periods. The birthday parties, playground visits, and family gatherings that had previously provided social connection became sources of anxiety when Sophia's medical restrictions conflicted with normal childhood activities and social expectations that other families took for granted. The dating impossibility that had characterized Maria's personal life since her divorce reflected the challenges of finding partners who understood pediatric cancer caregiving demands and the financial constraints that prevented normal courtship activities like dinner dates, entertainment events, or weekend trips that would require specialized childcare and medical supervision for Sophia. The few dating attempts that Maria had pursued through online platforms had ended when potential partners realized the extent of Sophia's medical needs and the limited time and emotional energy that remained available for relationship development after managing work, medical appointments, and financial crisis. The educational challenges that Sophia's medical treatment created included frequent absences from school during hospitalization periods and treatment side effects, difficulty concentrating during periods when medications affected her cognitive function, and social isolation from classmates who didn't understand her medical condition or the restrictions that her treatment imposed on normal childhood activities. The school district had provided home tutoring services during Sophia's hospitalization periods, but the academic disruption had required additional educational support that cost $180 per week for specialized tutoring that helped Sophia maintained grade-level performance despite missing approximately 40% of the school year during active treatment periods. The utility costs that had escalated due to Sophia's medical needs included increased electricity consumption for air filtration systems, medical equipment, and frequent laundry for maintaining sterile clothing and bedding that couldn't be exposed to normal household bacteria or environmental contaminants. The medical equipment that operated continuously in their apartment had increased their monthly electricity bill from $140 to $380, representing money that was diverted from medical expenses while creating cascading late fees and penalty charges. When Maria couldn't afford to pay utilities on time due to competing medical bills and basic survival expenses, the food costs that had increased due to Sophia's dietary restrictions and nutritional requirements had reached $680 monthly for groceries that met her limited tolerance for textures, flavors, and food preparations that her digestive system could handle during chemotherapy treatments. The dietary restrictions eliminated most cost-effective meal options, like bulk cooking, shared meals, and generic food products, forcing Maria to purchase specific brands, organic ingredients, and specialized preparations that Sophia's compromised immune system could safely tolerate without triggering dangerous digestive complications or nutritional deficiencies. The financial analysis that any reasonable advisor would conduct showed that accepting the Silver Creek Saloon inheritance represented economic suicide for a single mother already facing overwhelming medical debt and caregiving responsibilities that consumed every available hour and dollar. The mathematical reality of $340,000 in property taxes, $480,000 in renovation costs, ongoing legal fees, and maintenance expenses made retaining the property seem like guaranteed financial destruction for someone who was already struggling to afford her daughter's cancer treatments and basic survival necessities. The certified letter from Gallatin County that accompanied the inheritance documents had been brutally clear about the timeline pressures, requiring Maria to begin tax payment and compliance activities within 90 days of accepting the inheritance, or face criminal charges for tax evasion and property abandonment that could result in fines up to $15,000 daily until compliance was achieved. The legal deadlines were creating additional stress during October 2023, when Sophia was beginning a new chemotherapy protocol that required Maria's consistent participation in treatment planning, side effect monitoring, and medication administration that demanded precise timing and constant attention to detail. The estate attorney who had contacted Maria about the inheritance, Michael Harrison from Bozeman Estate Law, had been brutally honest during their September 20th phone consultation, explaining that accepting the Silver Creek Saloon would make her personally liable for all accumulated debts, property violations, and ongoing compliance costs that could easily exceed $600,000, while providing no clear path to financial recovery through property sales or business development. Harrison had strongly recommended disclaiming the inheritance and allowing Gallatin County to handle disposal through tax foreclosure proceedings that would eliminate any personal liability for the property's accumulated problems. But what Maria didn't know as she faced the impossible choice between disclaiming the inheritance and accepting financial responsibility for a saloon that everyone warned would complete her family's financial destruction was that Great-Aunt Eleanor's decision to maintain the property despite decades of losses had been motivated by family legends about something far more valuable than a deteriorating frontier saloon. The rotting floorboards and structural damage that contractors estimated would cost nearly $500,000 to repair concealed one of the most significant presidential historical discoveries in American history, containing secrets that would transform her family's desperate medical crisis into opportunities that exceeded anything a diner waitress from Montana could have imagined about the hidden value of seemingly worthless frontier property. The utilities crisis that had been escalating throughout September 2023 represented just one more system failure in Maria's increasingly desperate situation, with Northwestern Energy threatening to disconnect their electricity service due to 2,040 in unpaid bills that had accumulated while Maria prioritized Sophia's medical expenses over basic household services. The disconnection notice that arrived on September 28th warned that electrical service would be terminated within 10 days unless full payment was received, creating an impossible situation where Maria would need to choose between paying for Sophia's life-saving medications or maintaining the sterile home environment that her medical team had identified as essential for preventing fatal infections during chemotherapy treatments. The electrical service that Sophia's medical equipment required included continuous operation of HEPA air filtration systems that consumed 200 watts of power around the clock, medication refrigeration units that maintained precise temperature, controls for injectable drugs worth $4,800 per month, and specialized medical devices, including nebulizers, oxygen concentrators, and monitoring equipment that couldn't be safely interrupted without compromising Sophia's treatment effectiveness. The medical equipment that operated in their apartment drew approximately 3,400 watts of continuous power, representing 63% of their total electricity consumption and making power disconnection potentially life-threatening for Sophia during periods when her immune system was suppressed by chemotherapy treatments. The water service complications that accompanied their utility crisis included a $1,680 outstanding balance with the Billings Water Department that had resulted from increased consumption required for maintaining sterile living conditions, including frequent laundry cycles for Sophia's clothing and bedding, daily sterilization of medical equipment and food preparation surfaces, and specialized cleaning protocols that required running water continuously during decontamination procedures. The water usage that Sophia's medical condition required had increased their monthly consumption from 3,200 gallons to 8,900 gallons, creating bills that averaged $420 monthly compared to their previous average of $140 monthly before Sophia's diagnosis and treatment began. The heating system emergency that had developed during Montana's early winter created additional crisis pressure when their apartment's furnace failed on October 3rd, requiring immediate repair costs of $2,400 to restore heating that was essential for Sophia's health during periods when her body temperature regulation was compromised by chemotherapy side effects. The furnace repair that their landlord refused to expedite due to Maria's history of late rent payments had left them without adequate heating for 11 days during temperatures that dropped to -8 degrees Fahrenheit, forcing Maria to purchase expensive space heaters that increased their electricity consumption, while creating fire hazards that could endanger Sophia's medical equipment and medication storage. The internet service disconnection that occurred on October 7th due to unpaid bills, totaling $580, had eliminated Maria's ability to communicate with Sophia's medical team through the patient portal system that doctors used to provide treatment. Updates, medication adjustments, and emergency medical guidance that was essential for managing Sophia's complex treatment protocol. The telemedicine appointments that had been scheduled to monitor Sophia's treatment progress were cancelled when their internet service was terminated, requiring costly in-person visits that consumed entire days and created additional travel expenses that Maria couldn't afford while missing work shifts that provided their only source of income. The phone service suspension that followed 3 days later, due to unpaid bills of $340, had eliminated Maria's ability to receive emergency calls from Sophia's school nurse, coordinate with medical providers during treatment emergencies, and maintain communication with employers who needed to reach her during medical crises that required immediate attention. The cell phone service that Maria had maintained through Verizon was terminated when automatic payments failed due to insufficient bank account funds, leaving them completely isolated during a period when Sophia was experiencing severe treatment. Side effects that required constant monitoring and potential emergency medical intervention. The transportation crisis that had been building throughout the fall reached a critical point when Maria's 2014 Ford F-150 failed inspection on October 12th due to brake system problems, exhaust emissions violations, and safety defects that would cost $4,800 to repair before the vehicle could be legally driven on Montana roads. The inspection failure had occurred during a week when Sophia was scheduled for 3 medical appointments, including chemotherapy treatment that couldn't be postponed without disrupting her treatment protocol and potentially compromising her remission status. The automotive insurance complications that accompanied their transportation problems included policy cancellation due to missed payments totaling $1,240, leaving Maria liable for driving violations and accident damages that could result in criminal charges and financial liability that would destroy any remaining credit standing. The insurance cancellation had occurred automatically when Maria's bank account couldn't cover the monthly premium payment, and the reinstatement requirements included full payment of outstanding premiums, plus penalties and fees that totaled $1,780 before coverage could be restored. The vehicle registration problems that prevented legal operation of their truck included expired license plates that required current insurance coverage and payment of registration fees totaling $340 before new plates could be issued. The registration renewal process that Montana required included emissions testing that their truck couldn't pass due to exhaust system problems, creating a circular problem where vehicle repairs were necessary before registration could be completed. But transportation was needed to access employment that would provide money for repairs. The public transportation limitations in Billings made vehicle ownership essential for maintaining Sophia's medical appointments, which were scheduled at different locations throughout the metropolitan area rather than concentrated at a single medical facility that could be accessed through bus routes. The medical appointment transportation that Sophia's treatment required included twice-weekly trips to Billings Clinic Children's Cancer Center, monthly pharmacy visits for medication pickup, quarterly imaging studies at Rocky Mountain Radiology, and emergency medical visits that could occur at any time during treatment cycles when Sophia developed complications that required immediate medical evaluation. The childcare crisis that had developed when Maria's regular babysitter moved to California in September had eliminated her access to qualified supervision for Sophia during work shifts, creating impossible scheduling conflicts between employment responsibilities and parenting duties that Sophia's medical condition required. The specialized childcare that Sophia needed due to her compromised immune system and complex medication schedule required caregivers with medical training and experience managing pediatric cancer patients, limiting available options to licensed practical nurses who charged $35 to $45 per hour for services that Maria couldn't afford even when she was working full-time hours. The daycare center restrictions that prevented Sophia from attending conventional childcare facilities included requirements for current vaccinations that Sophia couldn't receive due to her suppressed immune system, policies prohibiting children with chronic medical conditions that required medication administration, and infection control measures that eliminated most affordable childcare options in the Billings area. The medical daycare facilities that specialized in caring for children with serious health conditions charged $280 to $420 per day for services that included medical monitoring and medication administration, making professional childcare financially impossible for Maria's limited income, while creating barriers to maintaining employment that provided their only source of financial support. The family support system breakdown that had occurred gradually since Sophia's diagnosis included the loss of extended family assistance due to geographic distance, financial limitations that prevented relatives from providing monetary support, and interpersonal conflicts that had developed when family members disagreed about Maria's medical and financial decisions. The family relationships that had previously provided emotional and practical support had become strained by the constant financial emergencies and medical crises that characterized Sophia's treatment period, leaving Maria increasingly isolated during the most challenging period of their lives. The social services system failures that Maria encountered while seeking emergency assistance included waiting lists for financial aid programs that stretched 6 to 18 months, eligibility requirements that excluded working families whose income exceeded poverty guidelines by small margins, and bureaucratic processes that required extensive documentation while providing minimal assistance that didn't address the scale of medical expenses associated with pediatric cancer treatment. The emergency assistance programs that Maria had applied for through Montana Department of Public Health and Human Services provided maximum benefits of $500 monthly for families with medical emergencies, representing less than 15% of Sophia's monthly medication costs, and providing no assistance with housing, transportation, or other expenses that were essential for maintaining stable living conditions during treatment. The Medicaid application process that had consumed dozens of hours during Sophia's treatment had ultimately resulted in partial coverage that excluded many essential medications and procedures while requiring extensive pre-authorization documentation for treatments that Sophia's medical team considered standard care. The Medicaid coverage that Sophia eventually qualified for provided benefits for basic medical services but excluded coverage for specialized medications that cost $1,800 monthly, emergency transportation services that averaged $840 per incident, and medical equipment that was essential for home monitoring during treatment periods when Sophia's condition was too unstable for routine outpatient management. The food assistance program limitations that affected their family's nutrition security included benefit amounts of $340 monthly through the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program that were insufficient for purchasing the organic foods and specialized dietary supplements that Sophia's treatment protocol required. The dietary restrictions that Sophia's compromised immune system imposed eliminated most foods that were eligible for purchase through SNAP benefits, including processed foods, restaurant meals, and conventional produce that might contain bacteria or chemical residues that could be dangerous for children receiving chemotherapy treatments. The Women, Infants, and Children Nutrition Program that provided additional food assistance had been discontinued when Sophia turned 8 years old, eliminating $180 monthly in benefits that had helped purchase the specialized nutritional supplements and organic foods that her medical condition required. The program termination had occurred during a particularly difficult treatment period, when Sophia was experiencing severe digestive side effects from chemotherapy, making proper nutrition even more critical for supporting her immune system recovery and treatment effectiveness. The Housing Assistance Program application that Maria had submitted through the Billings Housing Authority had been placed on a waiting list that currently extended 43 months for families without emergency circumstances, while the emergency housing criteria excluded working families whose income exceeded poverty guidelines even when medical expenses consumed most of their earnings. The housing assistance that Maria desperately needed to reduce their monthly rent from $2,800 to an affordable level was unavailable due to program funding limitations and eligibility requirements that didn't account for extraordinary medical expenses that were beyond any family's ability to budget or predict. The legal aid services that Maria had attempted to access for assistance with insurance appeals and medical debt management were overwhelmed with requests and maintained waiting lists for non-emergency cases that stretched 8 to 12 months. The legal assistance that Maria needed for fighting insurance coverage denials required specialized knowledge of healthcare law and insurance regulations that wasn't available through volunteer legal aid programs, forcing her to hire private attorneys at $350 per hour for services that consumed money needed for Sophia's medical care, while providing no guarantee of successful outcomes. The bankruptcy consultation that Maria had pursued through a free legal clinic had revealed that medical debt couldn't be easily discharged through personal bankruptcy proceedings when the debts were ongoing due to continuing medical treatment, making bankruptcy an ineffective solution for families dealing with chronic medical conditions that generated continuous expenses. The bankruptcy attorney had explained that Sophia's ongoing treatment costs would continue accumulating even after existing debt was discharged, creating a situation where bankruptcy would provide only temporary relief while damaging Maria's credit standing and limiting her access to emergency financing during future medical crises. The credit score deterioration that had resulted from missed payments and high debt utilization had reduced Maria's FICO score from 720 to 380, eliminating her access to conventional loans, credit cards with reasonable interest rates, and rental housing in neighborhoods with good schools and medical facilities. The credit damage that had accumulated during Sophia's treatment had created cascading problems, including security deposit requirements for utilities, higher insurance premiums, and employment restrictions for positions that required credit checks. The bank account problems that had developed when Maria's checking account was overdrawn for 6 consecutive months included automatic closure by First Interstate Bank due to excessive overdraft fees and negative account balances that totaled $2,400 in accumulated penalties. The bank account closure had eliminated Maria's ability to receive direct deposit payments from her employers, cash payroll checks without expensive check cashing fees, and maintain automatic payments for essential services, including insurance and utilities. The payday loan cycle that Maria had entered to manage cash flow during medical emergencies included high-interest loans from 3 different providers that charged effective annual interest rates exceeding 400% while requiring repayment from future paychecks that were already committed to medical expenses and basic survival costs. The payday loans that had provided temporary relief during Sophia's hospitalization periods had created a debt spiral where loan payments consumed 47% of Maria's gross income while providing decreasing amounts of available cash for actual emergencies. The employment agency problems that Maria encountered while seeking additional work included restrictions on available positions due to her limited schedule flexibility, transportation problems that prevented her from accepting jobs in other cities, and background check issues related to her credit score that eliminated opportunities for positions in healthcare, education, and financial services. The employment limitations that Sophia's medical needs imposed had reduced Maria's job opportunities by approximately 70% compared to other workers with similar experience and qualifications. The professional licensing complications that affected Maria's ability to increase her income included expired certifications for food service management that she couldn't afford to renew at $340 per certification, and continuing education requirements that she couldn't complete due to scheduling conflicts with Sophia's medical appointments. The professional development opportunities that might have led to higher-paying positions were unavailable due to time constraints and financial limitations that prevented Maria from investing in education or training that could improve their long-term financial situation. The educational debt problems that had been manageable before Sophia's diagnosis had become overwhelming when Maria was forced to defer her student loan payments due to financial hardship, resulting in interest capitalization that increased her total debt from $34,000 to $47,000, while eliminating her eligibility for additional federal financial aid. The student loan payments that resumed after her deferment period ended required $420 monthly for loans that had originally required $280 monthly, creating additional pressure on an already impossible budget. The insurance policy cancellations that had occurred due to missed premium payments included health insurance coverage that required COBRA payments of $2,400 monthly after Maria's employment termination, life insurance coverage that would have provided $50,000 in benefits for Sophia's future care if Maria became unable to work, and disability insurance that would have provided income replacement during periods when Maria couldn't work due to Sophia's medical emergencies. The insurance coverage gaps that had developed during their financial crisis had eliminated safety nets that could have provided financial protection during medical emergencies, while increasing their vulnerability to catastrophic expenses that could destroy any possibility of financial recovery. The medical equipment financing problems that had emerged when Sophia needed specialized home monitoring devices included lease agreements that required $680 monthly payments for equipment that insurance wouldn't purchase, co-signer requirements that Maria couldn't meet due to her damaged credit standing, and security deposits that totaled $3,400 for medical devices that Sophia needed for safe management of her treatment at home. The medical equipment costs that weren't covered by insurance had forced Maria to choose between purchasing necessary monitoring devices and maintaining other essential expenses, including housing and transportation. The prescription medication, supply interruptions that had occurred when Maria couldn't afford monthly refills had created dangerous gaps in Sophia's treatment protocol that could compromise her remission status and require additional medical interventions to restore treatment effectiveness. The medication adherence problems that resulted from financial constraints had required emergency interventions, including pharmaceutical company assistance programs that provided temporary relief but didn't address the underlying problem of ongoing costs that exceeded Maria's ability to pay. The emergency fund depletion that had occurred gradually during Sophia's treatment had eliminated Maria's ability to respond to unexpected expenses, including vehicle repairs, medical emergencies, and household crises that previously would have been manageable with savings that had been accumulated over 12 years of careful financial planning. The financial reserves that had provided security and stability for their family had been completely exhausted within 18 months of Sophia's diagnosis, leaving them vulnerable to any additional crisis that might require immediate financial response. The retirement account liquidation that Maria had been forced to complete during Sophia's initial treatment period had eliminated $23,800 in 401k savings, while generating tax penalties that created additional debt obligations and eliminated any financial security for Maria's future retirement. The retirement savings that had been intended to provide long-term financial security had been consumed by medical expenses that continued accumulating faster than Maria could generate income through employment. The home equity exhaustion that had occurred when Maria was forced to sell their family home to pay for Sophia's treatment had eliminated their primary asset and forced them into rental housing that consumed 68% of Maria's gross income while providing no equity, accumulation, or long-term financial benefits. The home sale that had provided $67,000 in proceeds after paying off their mortgage had been consumed by medical expenses within 14 months, leaving them with no assets and no path to financial recovery through traditional means. The investment account liquidation that had provided temporary relief during Sophia's diagnosis period had eliminated $12,400 in mutual fund investments that had been intended for Sophia's college education, leaving no resources for her future educational expenses, while consuming assets that could have provided long-term financial growth. The investment liquidation had generated capital gains taxes that created additional debt obligations while providing only short-term relief from immediate medical expenses. The family loan defaults that had occurred when Maria couldn't repay. Money borrowed from relatives during medical emergencies had damaged relationships with extended family members, while eliminating access to informal financial support that had previously provided safety nets during temporary difficulties. The family relationship strain that had resulted from unpaid loans totaling $8,400 had created additional stress during a period when emotional support was essential for managing Sophia's treatment and maintaining family stability. The community resource exhaustion that had developed as Maria accessed every available assistance program included the depletion of charitable organization benefits that were limited to once-per-year assistance, religious organization aid that was restricted to active congregation members, and civic group assistance that was reserved for long-time community residents. The community support that had initially provided hope and assistance had been overwhelmed by the scale and duration of their financial crisis, leaving Maria with few remaining options for emergency assistance. The time management crisis that resulted from Sophia's complex medical needs included the impossible task of coordinating medical appointments, employment responsibilities, household management, and financial crisis management, while providing emotional support to a child dealing with life-threatening illness. The scheduling demands that Sophia's treatment imposed required 40 to 60 hours weekly for medical appointments, treatment administration, and recovery supervision, leaving insufficient time for the employment hours that were necessary to generate income for meeting their basic survival needs. But despite all these cascading system failures that had created an impossible web of financial, medical, and practical crises, Maria's situation was about to become even more complex when she received the inheritance documents that would force her to make a decision that everyone would warn against, unaware that her choice would ultimately lead to discoveries that would transform not only her family's desperate circumstances, but contribute to American historical understanding in ways that a struggling single mother from Montana could never have imagined possible. The inheritance documentation that Maria received on October 15, 2023, arrived through certified mail that required her signature at a time when she was already overwhelmed by Sophia's deteriorating medical condition and the cascading financial crises that had eliminated every conventional option for family survival. The thick manila envelope from the law offices of Henderson, Morrison and Associates in Bozeman contained 27 pages of legal documents that described Great-Aunt Eleanor's bequest of the Silver Creek Saloon property, along with a personal letter written in Eleanor's distinctive handwriting that hinted at family secrets and hidden value that only someone with Santos determination and integrity could properly discover and protect for future generations. The initial property assessment that accompanied the inheritance documents had been prepared by Mountain West property evaluators and painted a devastating picture of the 1880s saloon building that had been abandoned since 1962 when the last residents left Silver Creek during the economic collapse that transformed the once thriving mining town into a ghost town. The 43-page assessment documented structural problems throughout the 2,400-square-foot building, including foundation settling that had created dangerous floor instability, roof damage that had allowed water infiltration for over 30 years, exterior wall deterioration that had compromised the building's structural integrity, and interior damage from decades of weather exposure, vandalism, and neglect that would require comprehensive renovation to make the property safe for human occupancy. The environmental assessment report that was included with the inheritance documentation revealed contamination problems that had accumulated during the building's 142-year history, including potential asbestos in ceiling tiles and insulation, materials, lead-based paint throughout the interior and exterior surfaces, and soil contamination around the building foundation from unknown sources that could include mining waste, petroleum products, or other hazardous materials that had been improperly disposed of during the property's industrial and commercial use periods. The environmental report estimated that comprehensive testing and remediation would cost between $89,000 and $156,000 before any renovation work could safely begin. The property tax documentation that accompanied the inheritance showed accumulated debt of $340,000, including principal taxes, interest charges and penalties that had been compounding annually since 1998, when Great-Aunt Eleanor had stopped making regular payments due to her declining health and financial difficulties. The tax debt had reached crisis levels during the final 5 years of Eleanor's life, when annual penalties and interest charges exceeded $23,000 yearly, while the property generated no income to offset the carrying costs that had made ownership financially unsustainable for a retired schoolteacher. Living on Social Security benefits. The Gallatin County demolition order that was attached to the inheritance documents required immediate compliance with safety and structural codes that would cost an estimated $480,000 to achieve or complete. Demolition of the building at an estimated cost of $127,000 to $184,000, depending on environmental remediation requirements and disposal methods for contaminated materials. The demolition order had been issued following a county inspection that identified the building as a public safety hazard due to structural instability, environmental contamination, and deteriorating conditions that posed risks to neighboring properties and anyone who might attempt to enter the building without proper safety equipment and training. The legal complications that surrounded the property included 3 outstanding liens totaling $67,000 from contractors who had performed roof repair work in 1978, electrical system maintenance in 1981, and plumbing repairs in 1985 that had never been fully paid due to Eleanor's financial constraints during her final decades of property ownership. The contractor liens had been accumulating interest and legal fees for over 40 years, creating additional claims against the property that would need resolution before clear title could be established and any renovation or sale could proceed. The sale zoning violations that affected the property included non-compliance with Gallatin County's historical preservation requirements that had been implemented in 1994 to protect the architectural integrity of Silver Creek's remaining frontier-era buildings. The historical preservation designation required that any renovation work be completed using period-appropriate materials and construction techniques by contractors certified in historical preservation methods, significantly increasing costs while limiting the scope of modifications that could be made to improve the building's functionality or commercial viability. The insurance complications that would affect any attempt to renovate or occupy the property included the impossibility of obtaining conventional property insurance due to the building's deteriorated condition, environmental contamination, and location in an abandoned town without fire department services or other emergency response capabilities. The specialized insurance coverage that would be required for renovation work was estimated to cost $18,000 to $31,000 annually, while providing limited protection against environmental liability, structural collapse, or other risks associated with restoring a 142-year-old building that had been abandoned for over 6 decades. The access and utility problems that complicated any renovation plans included the absence of electrical service to the building since 1987, water system disconnection that had occurred in 1995 when the town's main water line was abandoned, and road access limitations that would require extensive coordination with Gallatin County for bringing construction equipment and materials to the remote location. The utility restoration costs that would be necessary before any serious renovation could begin were estimated at $47,000 to $73,000 for bringing electrical and water services to the property over distances exceeding 2 miles from the nearest. Active utility connections. The transportation and logistics challenges that would affect any renovation project included the remote location of Silver Creek, which was accessible only through 23 miles of gravel roads that were impassable during winter months and required four-wheel drive vehicles during spring mud season. The transportation limitations would significantly increase costs for bringing construction materials, equipment, and workers to the site, while creating scheduling constraints that could extend renovation timelines and increase labor costs due to the difficulty of maintaining consistent work crews at such a remote location. The first professional consultation that Maria arranged was with estate attorney Michael Harrison from Bozeman Estate Law, who reviewed the inheritance documentation during a October 18th meeting at his downtown office and provided what he described as the most straightforward legal advice I've ever given in 26 years of practice. Harrison spread the property assessment reports, tax documents, and compliance requirements across his conference table, while explaining that accepting the inheritance would create immediate personal liability for debts exceeding $600,000, while providing assets worth approximately negative $200,000 based on current market conditions for abandoned properties in ghost towns. The legal analysis that Harrison provided included detailed explanations of Montana inheritance law, which required beneficiaries to accept or disclaim inherited property within 90 days of notification, and the personal liability implications of inheritance acceptance, which would make Maria responsible for all accumulated debts, ongoing compliance costs, and future legal obligations associated with property ownership, regardless of her financial capacity to meet those obligations. Harrison emphasized that inheritance disclaimer was the only rational choice for someone in Maria's financial situation, and that accepting the property would guarantee bankruptcy while providing no conceivable path to financial recovery. The second professional opinion that Maria sought came from environmental consultant Dr. Patricia Chen from Rocky Mountain Environmental Services, who reviewed the contamination assessment reports and provided additional analysis based on her experience with similar properties throughout Montana's mining regions. Dr. Chen's consultation, which cost $840 that Maria borrowed from her sister, Rosa, revealed that the environmental problems documented in the initial assessment were likely conservative estimates that didn't account for potential mercury contamination from historical mining operations or groundwater, contamination that could extend beyond the immediate property boundaries. The environmental compliance requirements that Dr. Chen explained included mandatory testing for additional contaminants that hadn't been included in the initial assessment, ongoing monitoring requirements that could continue for decades after remediation was completed, and potential liability for contamination that might affect neighboring properties or groundwater supplies used by residents throughout the region. The environmental liability that property ownership would create could generate legal claims and cleanup costs that would continue accumulating indefinitely, making the property a permanent financial liability rather than an asset that could provide any economic benefit. The third expert consultation that Maria arranged was with historical preservation contractor James Mitchell from Frontier Restoration Services, who specialized in renovating 19th-century buildings throughout Montana and had extensive experience with projects similar to the Silver Creek Saloon. Mitchell's site inspection, which required a full day of travel and cost $1,200 for assessment services, revealed structural problems that exceeded the initial property evaluation, including foundation damage that would require complete reconstruction, roof deterioration that had compromised load-bearing walls, and floor system failure that made the building unsafe for occupancy without immediate structural intervention. The renovation cost estimate that Mitchell provided totaled $680,000 to $920,000 for bringing the building up to current safety and building codes while maintaining compliance with historical preservation requirements that mandated using traditional construction materials and techniques. The renovation timeline that Mitchell projected would require 18 to 24 months for completion, assuming no delays for environmental remediation, permit approvals, or weather-related construction interruptions that were common in Montana's mountainous regions during winter months. The financing consultation that Maria pursued with several banks and credit unions revealed that conventional construction loans were unavailable for projects involving abandoned properties with environmental contamination, historical preservation requirements, and negative equity positions that made traditional lending impossible. The specialized financing options that were available for historical renovation projects required substantial down payments, perfect credit ratings, and personal guarantees that Maria couldn't provide due to her existing debt obligations and damaged credit standing. The Montana Historical Preservation Society consultation that Maria arranged through a referral from contractor Mitchell provided insights into grant programs and tax incentives that might offset some renovation costs, but revealed that available assistance was limited to projects with clear commercial viability and applicants with substantial financial resources to complete renovation work before receiving any grant reimbursements. The grant application process required extensive documentation, professional architectural plans, and historical research that would cost $23,000 to $34,000 to complete before grant eligibility could even be determined. The insurance consultation that Maria conducted with 3 different agents specializing in unusual properties revealed that comprehensive coverage for the Silver Creek property would be impossible to obtain at any reasonable cost due to the combination of environmental contamination, structural deterioration, remote location, and absence of emergency services. The limited insurance coverage that was available would cost $31,000 to $45,000 annually, while excluding coverage for environmental liability, structural collapse, and many other risks that were most likely to affect the property during renovation or occupancy. The family consultation that Maria conducted with her sister Rosa, brother Miguel, and mother Carmen revealed unanimous opposition to accepting the inheritance, with family members expressing concerns about the financial risks, legal liabilities, and practical impossibilities of managing property renovation, while Sophia required intensive medical care. The family meeting that occurred on October 25th at Rosa's house in Great Falls included emotional appeals from Maria's mother, who reminded her that single mothers with sick children cannot afford to gamble with real estate disasters that will destroy any chance of recovery. Rosa's practical analysis of the inheritance included calculations showing that the minimum costs for achieving legal compliance would exceed $800,000, while providing no guarantee that the property would have any market value after renovation was completed. Rosa, who worked as a real estate agent in Great Falls, emphasized that ghost town properties had no established market, and that even successful renovation projects in similar locations had failed to recover their investment costs due to lack of commercial viability and buyer interest in remote properties without infrastructure or services. Miguel's engineering background led him to focus on the structural and environmental problems that made the property renovation technically challenging and financially risky, even for experienced developers with substantial resources. Miguel's analysis of the construction requirements emphasized that the remote location, environmental contamination, and historical preservation restrictions would create ongoing complications that could generate cost overruns and delays that would make any renovation budget meaningless, while creating open-ended financial commitments that could continue for years beyond initial completion estimates. Carmen's emotional appeal focused on the welfare of Sophia, who needed stability and security during her cancer treatment rather than additional stress and uncertainty from a renovation project that would consume Maria's time, energy, and financial resources during the most critical period of her daughter's medical care. Carmen emphasized that Maria's primary responsibility was to Sophia's health and recovery, and that accepting the inheritance would create conflicts between property management obligations and parenting duties that Sophia's medical condition demanded. The real estate market analysis that Maria commissioned from Gallatin Valley appraisers cost $2,400 and revealed that comparable properties in abandoned Montana towns had sold for amounts ranging from $5,000 to $47,000 after complete renovation, representing values that were substantially less than the costs required for bringing the Silver Creek property up to habitable condition. The appraisal report emphasized that market demand for properties in ghost towns was extremely limited and primarily restricted to wealthy individuals seeking unusual vacation properties rather than serious investors looking for financial returns. The tourism potential assessment that Maria explored through consultation with Montana's Tourism Development Office revealed that Silver Creek's remote location and lack of infrastructure made commercial tourism development unlikely to succeed without substantial, ongoing subsidies and marketing support that would require resources far beyond what individual property owners could provide. The tourism official who reviewed the property information explained that successful ghost town tourism required coordination among multiple property owners, government agencies, and tourism businesses to create attractions that could draw sufficient visitors to support commercial operations. The business development consultation that Maria arranged with a small business administration counselor revealed that any commercial use of the renovated property would require additional permits, licenses, and compliance with commercial building codes that would significantly increase renovation costs while creating ongoing operational obligations that would require business management experience and financial resources that Maria didn't possess. The SBA counselor emphasized that restaurant and hospitality businesses had high failure rates even in favorable locations, and that attempting such ventures in remote locations without established customer bases would be extremely risky for inexperienced operators. The legal timeline pressure that governed Maria's decision-making process required her to accept or disclaim the inheritance by January 13, 2024. Creating a 90-day window for making a choice that would affect her family's financial future for decades. The inheritance laws that controlled the decision process didn't allow for conditional acceptance or partial inheritance, meaning that Maria would need to accept complete responsibility for all property-related debts and obligations, or forfeit any potential benefits that might exist if the property contained hidden value that wasn't apparent from the available documentation. The continuing medical crisis that Sophia experienced during the inheritance decision period included a serious infection that required 6 days of hospitalization in early November, generating $34,000 in medical expenses while preventing Maria from working and eliminating income that she needed for basic survival expenses. The medical emergency that occurred during the inheritance evaluation period emphasized the impossible conflict between managing Sophia's health needs and conducting the research necessary for making an informed decision about property inheritance that could affect their family's financial security for generations. The emotional pressure that accompanied the inheritance decision included Maria's growing awareness that conventional employment would never provide sufficient income for meeting Sophia's medical expenses while building financial security for their family's future. The mathematical reality of their situation showed that even if Maria could find full-time employment at $15 per hour, their annual income would remain insufficient for covering Sophia's treatment costs while accumulating savings that could provide security against future medical emergencies or prepare for Sophia's long-term care needs. The family legend research that Maria conducted while evaluating the inheritance included conversations with elderly relatives who remembered Great-Aunt Eleanor's stories about the Silver Creek property and her conviction that the Saloon building contained something more valuable than gold that had motivated her to maintain ownership despite decades of financial loss. The family stories that emerged from these conversations included references to Eleanor's belief that the property held historical significance related to famous visitors and events that had occurred during Silver Creek's mining boom period in the 1880s and 1890s. Eleanor's personal papers that Maria discovered while cleaning out her great-aunt's apartment included a collection of historical research documents, newspaper clippings, and correspondence related to Silver Creek's history, and the Saloon building's role in frontier Montana politics and business. The research materials that Eleanor had accumulated over 40 years of property ownership suggested that she had been investigating connections between the Saloon and significant historical figures, including references to visits by territorial governors, mining magnates, and federal officials who had conducted business in Silver Creek during its boom period. The historical research that Maria conducted at the Montana Historical Society revealed that Silver Creek had been a significant political and commercial center during the 1880s, serving as a meeting place for territorial legislature members, federal land office officials, and business leaders who shaped Montana's transition from territorial status to statehood. The historical record suggested that the Silver Creek Saloon had hosted important political meetings and business negotiations that influenced Montana's early development. But the documentation was incomplete and didn't provide specific evidence of valuable artifacts or documents that might remain at the property. The financial planning analysis that Maria completed with assistance from a non-profit credit counseling service revealed that accepting the inheritance would worsen her debt-to-income ratio to over 500%, while creating legal obligations that could result in personal bankruptcy within 6 to 12 months. The financial counselor who reviewed Maria's situation emphasized that inheritance acceptance would violate every principle of sound financial management and would virtually guarantee financial destruction for a family already struggling with overwhelming medical debt and limited income potential. The alternative analysis that the financial counselor provided showed that disclaiming the inheritance and focusing on debt management, employment stability, and Sophia's medical care would provide the best opportunity for gradual financial recovery over a 5 to 7 year period. The debt consolidation and management strategies that were available to Maria could reduce her monthly payment obligations while preserving her ability to maintain stable housing and transportation that were essential for Sophia's continued medical care and treatment success. The decision deadline pressure that intensified as January approached created additional stress during a period when Sophia was experiencing treatment side effects that required constant monitoring and emotional support from Maria. The inheritance decision that needed to be made during the holidays coincided with Sophia's most difficult treatment phase, creating conflicts between the research and consultation time that informed decision-making required and the caregiving responsibilities that Sophia's condition demanded during medical emergencies and recovery periods. The mental health impact. that the inheritance decision was having on Maria included increased anxiety, sleep disruption, and difficulty concentrating that affected her work performance and her ability to provide emotional support to Sophia during frightening medical procedures and treatment complications. The stress that resulted from facing an impossible choice between financial suicide and potential opportunity was affecting Maria's health and emotional stability during a period when Sophia needed her mother to be strong and reliable during the most challenging experience of her young life. The consultation fatigue that Maria experienced after weeks of expert meetings, property evaluations, and financial analysis had consumed over $8,000 in borrowed money while providing unanimous professional advice to disclaim the inheritance and focus on conventional approaches to debt management and financial recovery. The professional consensus that accepting the inheritance would be financially catastrophic was overwhelming and consistent across every expert consultation, creating pressure to make the rational choice despite Maria's growing desperation and her awareness that conventional solutions weren't adequate for their family's extraordinary circumstances. But despite all the expert warnings, family opposition, financial analysis, and rational evaluation that demonstrated the impossibility of successful property renovation, Maria was beginning to realize that the inheritance represented her only potential opportunity for transforming their family's trajectory from certain financial collapse toward any possibility of security and stability. The mathematical reality of their current situation made even a disastrous inheritance seem preferable to the guaranteed poverty and medical crisis that awaited them if nothing changed in their circumstances. The decision that Maria would ultimately make on January 8, 2024, to accept the Silver Creek Saloon inheritance, despite overwhelming evidence that it would worsen rather than improve their financial situation, would be driven by maternal desperation and the exhaustion of all conventional options rather than rational financial planning. But what Maria couldn't have known, as she prepared to sign the inheritance acceptance documents, was that Great-Aunt Eleanor's decades of research and her mysterious conviction about the property's hidden value were based on family knowledge and historical evidence that would soon transform Maria's desperate gamble into the most significant presidential historical discovery in modern American history. Maria Santos had never imagined that her dedication to serving others through food service work would lead to the discovery that would transform not only her family's desperate circumstances, but contribute to American presidential history in ways that exceeded anything a struggling single mother from Montana could have envisioned. Her journey from a hopeful culinary arts student to a desperate diner waitress accepting a contaminated ghost town inheritance had been shaped by consistent choices that demonstrated the character traits that would make her worthy of the extraordinary transformation that awaited discovery beneath the rotting floorboards of her inherited saloon property. Maria's childhood in Las Cruces, New Mexico, had been shaped by her grandmother, Isabella's emphasis on hard work, family, responsibility, and helping others in the community, values that were demonstrated daily through Isabella's operation of a small restaurant that served working-class families and provided free meals to anyone who couldn't afford to pay. The Santos household had been characterized by dinner-table conversations about service to others and the importance of treating every person with dignity and respect, regardless of their economic circumstances or social status, lessons that would guide Maria's approach to every challenge she would face throughout her life. The decision to pursue culinary arts as a career had been motivated by Maria's genuine desire to bring comfort and nourishment to others through food service, rather than by considerations of salary or prestige that influenced many of her high school classmates who chose more lucrative professional paths. Her choice to specialize in restaurant management had been inspired by volunteer experiences at the Las Cruces Community Kitchen during her teenage years, where she had worked with homeless families and witnessed the profound impact that a warm meal and respectful treatment could have on people who had been dismissed or ignored by others in their community. Maria's academic performance during her culinary arts studies at New Mexico State University had been exceptional, earning a 3.7 GPA while working 2 part-time jobs to minimize student loan debt and completing extensive internships that demonstrated her natural aptitude for kitchen management, customer service, and staff coordination in high-pressure restaurant environments. Her professors had consistently praised her ability to remain calm during service rushes and her talent for developing creative solutions to operational challenges while maintaining food quality and customer satisfaction standards that exceeded industry expectations. The culinary program internship experiences that Maria had completed included extensive work in commercial kitchens, catering operations, and restaurant management positions where she had learned to develop menus, implement food safety protocols, and coordinate with suppliers, health inspectors, and staff members to maintain operations that served hundreds of customers daily. The intensive training had prepared her not only for food service responsibilities, but also for business management skills that would prove essential for managing complex renovation projects and coordinating with multiple contractors and government agencies. The scholarship that Maria had earned for academic excellence and community service had covered a significant portion of her education costs, but she had still accumulated $34,000 in student loans that she had approached responsibly through careful budgeting and consistent payments that had maintained excellent credit standing throughout her early career. Her financial management had been exemplary, with emergency savings, modest living expenses, and debt payments that demonstrated personal responsibility and long-term planning that characterized her approach to all aspects of life. The professional development that Maria had pursued throughout her restaurant career included specialized training in food safety management, restaurant operations, and customer service excellence that had made her particularly valuable for establishments that required experienced managers capable of maintaining high standards during busy periods. The additional training had been completed through industry workshops and certification programs, while she maintained full-time employment responsibilities, demonstrating her commitment to excellence and continuous improvement in her chosen profession. Maria's employment at several respected restaurants in Albuquerque had begun immediately after graduation, with recognition as one of the most promising young managers in the local food service industry, leading to rapid advancement to assistant manager positions that involved training new employees and implementing operational improvements that increased efficiency and customer satisfaction. Her colleagues had consistently praised her ability to remain professional during difficult situations and her talent for resolving customer complaints and staff conflicts while maintaining positive working relationships with everyone involved. The community service that Maria had maintained throughout her restaurant career included volunteer work with the Albuquerque Food Bank, weekend meal service programs for elderly residents, and participation in community festivals that provided affordable food options for families who couldn't afford restaurant meals. Her volunteer activities had reflected her deep commitment to using her professional skills to benefit families who needed assistance, while building community connections that enriched her understanding of the population she served through her professional work. The marriage that Maria had entered with Tony Santos in 2016 had initially seemed like a partnership built on shared values about family, community service, and financial responsibility, but had gradually revealed fundamental differences in character and priorities that became apparent during the stress of Sophia's diagnosis and the demands of pediatric cancer caregiving. Tony's inability to cope with the emotional and financial demands of their daughter's medical needs had led to increasingly irresponsible behavior that ultimately forced Maria to choose between protecting Sophia's interests and preserving their marriage. The early years of Sophia's development had been characterized by Maria's careful attention to nutrition, educational enrichment activities, and the creation of learning environments that supported her curiosity and creativity. Maria had researched extensively about child development, implemented evidence-based parenting strategies, and sought professional guidance when Sophia's growth patterns and developmental milestones began showing variations that required medical evaluation and specialist consultation. The cancer diagnosis process that began when Sophia was 6 years old had required Maria to advocate persistently for comprehensive medical evaluations while navigating insurance barriers and waiting lists that delayed access to diagnostic services for nearly 6 months. Maria's professional experience with health department regulations and food safety protocols had been invaluable for understanding medical procedures and ensuring that Sophia received thorough assessments from qualified specialists who could provide accurate diagnosis and appropriate treatment recommendations. The divorce proceedings that had consumed 18 months of Maria's life had been complicated by Tony's attempts to avoid financial responsibility while claiming parenting rights that would have interfered with Sophia's treatment schedule and medical stability. Maria's determination to protect Sophia's interests had required extensive legal consultation and court appearances that had consumed her savings while demonstrating her unwavering commitment to her daughter's welfare above all other considerations, including her own financial security and emotional well-being. The financial management that Maria had maintained, even during her marriage, had been characterized by careful budgeting, consistent savings, and responsible spending that had provided security for her family while avoiding the consumer debt that affected many families with dual professional incomes. Her personal financial responsibility had been demonstrated through vehicle purchases with cash, housing choices that prioritized savings over luxury, and retirement planning that showed long-term thinking about her family's future security and Sophia's potential long-term support needs. The parenting approach that Maria had developed for raising Sophia had emphasized patience, consistency, and evidence-based medical care while maintaining high expectations for her development and independence within the constraints imposed by her medical condition. Her parenting style reflected her professional understanding of nutrition and health, combined with genuine love and respect for Sophia's individual personality and interests, creating a supportive environment that had helped her maintain emotional resilience despite the challenges of cancer treatment. The work ethic that characterized Maria's approach to restaurant management had been recognized through multiple Employee Excellence Awards, positive evaluations from supervisors, and customer testimonials that demonstrated her reputation for going above and beyond basic job requirements to ensure optimal dining experiences for restaurant patrons. The extra time that she spent developing staff training programs, coordinating with suppliers, and maintaining food quality standards had made her one of the most respected restaurant managers in the Albuquerque area before her move to Montana. The continuing education that Maria had pursued throughout her career included completion of additional courses in business management, attendance at food service industry conferences, and participation in professional organizations that kept her current with advances in restaurant operations and food safety regulations. Her commitment to professional development had been maintained even during personal financial stress, demonstrating her dedication to providing the highest quality service regardless of her own circumstances. The staff mentorship that had characterized Maria's management practice included training new employees in proper food handling procedures, coordinating professional development opportunities, and ensuring that team members understood both technical requirements and customer service expectations. Her mentoring abilities had been recognized through assignments training management trainees and her selection for committee work that shaped operational policies throughout the restaurant chains where she had worked. The customer service excellence that Maria had demonstrated throughout her career included her ability to handle difficult situations with grace and professionalism, resolve complex complaints to customer satisfaction, and maintain positive relationships with regular patrons, who appreciated her attention to detail and genuine concern for their dining experience. Her customer service skills had been essential for building repeat business and maintaining restaurant reputation during competitive periods in the food service industry. The crisis management skills that Maria had developed through years of managing restaurant operations during peak periods, staff emergencies, and equipment failures had prepared her for handling high-stress situations with calm decision-making and effective communication that supported team members while maintaining service quality. The crisis management experience had been essential for managing Sophia's diagnosis and would prove valuable for the unexpected challenges that awaited her at the inherited Saloon property. The decision that Maria made on January 8, 2024, to accept the Silver Creek Saloon inheritance despite overwhelming professional advice against the decision was driven by maternal desperation and the mathematical impossibility of their current financial trajectory. But what she discovered when she arrived at the property on January 15th to begin the devastating process of assessing renovation requirements would transform her understanding of American history while vindicating her desperate choice in ways that exceeded anything she could have imagined. The initial property inspection that Maria conducted on that bitterly cold January morning revealed exactly the problems that every expert had predicted, with structural damage throughout the building, environmental contamination that made extended occupancy dangerous without proper protective equipment, and renovation requirements that would obviously consume far more money than she could ever hope to acquire. The building's interior was filled with debris, fallen ceiling tiles, and evidence of decades of weather damage that confirmed every professional warning about the impossibility of successful restoration. The flooring assessment that Maria began in the main saloon area revealed extensive water damage and structural instability that would require complete replacement of the original 1880s wooden floors that had been installed when the building was constructed. The floorboards that she began removing to assess foundation damage were warped, rotted, and unsafe for supporting the weight of renovation equipment or building materials that would be necessary for any serious restoration effort. The discovery that would change everything occurred at 2:47 p.m. on January 22nd, when Maria's careful removal of damaged floorboards in the northeast corner of the main saloon revealed a hidden compartment that had been concealed beneath the original flooring. Since the building's construction in 1881, the compartment, which measured approximately 4 feet by 6 feet and 3 feet deep, contained a leather-wrapped collection of documents, artifacts, and correspondence that had been preserved in remarkably good condition by the dry Montana climate and protection from moisture that the sealed compartment had provided. The initial examination of the documents that Maria discovered revealed correspondence bearing official letterhead from the Executive Office of President Theodore Roosevelt, dated between 1903 and 1908, and addressed to territorial officials and business leaders who had conducted meetings at the Silver Creek Saloon during Roosevelt's administration. The presidential correspondence included detailed discussions of Montana statehood preparations, mineral rights policies, and conservation initiatives that would later become major components of Roosevelt's domestic policy agenda. The historical Significance that Maria began to understand as she carefully examined the discovered materials included evidence that the Silver Creek Saloon had served as an unofficial Western White House location where President Roosevelt had conducted critical government business during his frequent visits to Montana for hunting and conservation activities. The correspondence revealed that Roosevelt had used the saloon as a secure meeting location for discussions with territorial governors, federal land office officials, and conservation advisors who shaped policies that influenced American environmental protection and Western development for decades. The document authentication process that Maria initiated through contact with the Montana Historical Society led to involvement of federal archivists and presidential historians, who confirmed that the discovered materials represented the most significant collection of Theodore Roosevelt administration documents found in over 50 years. The documents included presidential directives, cabinet correspondence, and policy development materials that had been missing from official archives and presumed lost during the transition from territorial to state government in Montana. The National Archives' response to Maria's discovery included immediate dispatch of a federal preservation team that spent 6 weeks cataloging and authenticating the materials while establishing security protocols to protect the documents during the evaluation process. The federal team's preliminary assessment confirmed that the discovered materials included original presidential correspondence, policy development documents, and historical artifacts that provided unprecedented insights into Roosevelt administration, decision-making processes, and Western policy development during a critical period in American history. The Smithsonian Institution involvement that followed the National Archives authentication included designation of the Silver Creek discovery as one of the most important presidential historical finds in modern American history, with implications for understanding Roosevelt's conservation philosophy, Western expansion policies, and the political relationships that shaped Montana's transition to statehood. The Smithsonian's preliminary evaluation indicated that the discovered materials would require years of scholarly analysis and would likely reshape historical understanding of Roosevelt's presidency and its long-term impact on American environmental and Western development policies. The legal framework that federal authorities established for managing Maria's discovery included immediate recognition of her legal ownership of the discovered materials while acknowledging the federal government's interests in acquiring the documents for historical preservation and public access. The complex legal negotiations that followed balanced property rights with historical preservation concerns while ensuring that Maria would receive appropriate compensation for providing access to materials that were essential for understanding American presidential history. The federal acquisition offer that was presented to Maria on March 15, 2024, included $47.8 million for the complete collection of discovered documents and artifacts, along with additional compensation for renovation of the Saloon building as a presidential history museum and visitor center. The acquisition agreement included provisions for Maria to serve as the museum's executive director at an annual salary of $280,000, along with consulting contracts for historical research and educational program development that provided long-term income security for her family. The consulting agreements that accompanied the federal acquisition included exclusive contracts for Maria's participation in documentary productions, educational programs, and historical research projects related to the Roosevelt administration and Western American development. The consulting fees and retainer agreements provided annual income exceeding $420,000, while ensuring that Maria's family would maintain financial security through her involvement with historically significant research and educational initiatives. The museum development project that emerged from Maria's discovery included federal funding for complete renovation of the Silver Creek Saloon as a Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Research Center, with construction costs of $12.8 million funded through the National Park Service and managed under Maria's oversight as project director. The museum project provided employment for dozens of local residents while creating a major tourist destination that would generate ongoing economic benefits for the entire region. The academic partnerships that were established for studying materials from Maria's discovery included collaborative agreements with major universities whose history and political science programs sought her participation in research projects, documentary productions, and educational initiatives about presidential history and Western American development. The academic collaborations provided additional income through speaking fees, consulting contracts, and royalty agreements, while contributing to scholarship that advanced understanding of American political and environmental history. The publishing opportunities that resulted from Maria's discovery included a book contract with a prestigious academic publisher for her memoir about discovering the presidential documents while managing her daughter's cancer treatment and their family's financial crisis. The book project attracted widespread interest from readers fascinated by the intersection of personal struggle and historical discovery that characterized Maria's experience, generating advance payments and royalty agreements that provided additional long-term income. The speaking engagement opportunities that emerged from Maria's national recognition included presentations at universities, historical societies, and professional conferences where her story inspired audiences while generating substantial fees for sharing her experiences with discovering and managing historically significant materials. The speaking fees ranged from $35,000 to $65,000 per presentation, providing additional income while contributing to public education about American history and the importance of historical preservation. The documentary rights that Maria negotiated with major production companies included exclusive arrangements for filming at the museum site and interviews about her discovery experience, generating substantial income while creating lasting records of the discovery and its historical significance. The documentary projects attracted international audiences interested in American presidential history, while providing Maria with ongoing royalty payments from global distribution agreements. The property development opportunities that Maria's financial success enabled included purchase of additional real estate in the Silver Creek area for development as tourist accommodations and visitor services that supported the growing number of people who traveled to Montana to visit the Roosevelt Presidential Research Center. The real estate investments provided potential for additional income while generating property appreciation that further enhanced her family's long-term financial security. The educational fund that Maria established for Sophia's future included sufficient resources for the finest medical care, educational opportunities, and adult support programs that would ensure her cancer treatment and recovery would never again limit her opportunities or family stability. The educational fund represented more than $4.2 million in dedicated resources that would provide Sophia with every opportunity for independence and success, regardless of future medical needs or economic conditions. The charitable foundation that Maria created from her financial success focused on providing assistance to families affected by pediatric cancer, medical debt, and financial crises that threatened family stability during medical emergencies. The Foundation's annual grants exceeded $680,000 and helped dozens of families pursue necessary medical treatments while supporting organizations that work to improve healthcare access and affordability for families facing medical crises. The Silver Creek community development that resulted from Maria's discovery included renovation of other historical buildings in the ghost town, development of tourist infrastructure, and creation of employment opportunities that revitalized the entire region while preserving its historical character. The community development generated over $23 million in annual economic activity while providing sustainable employment for residents throughout the area. The cancer treatment improvements that Maria's financial success enabled for Sophia included access to the most advanced pediatric oncology specialists in the country, cutting-edge treatments that weren't covered by conventional insurance, and ongoing support programs that ensured optimal medical outcomes. The enhanced medical care had resulted in Sophia achieving complete remission while eliminating the financial stress that had previously interfered with her treatment and family stability. The career transformation that Maria experienced included transition from struggling food service worker to serving as a respected historical research director whose expertise in managing presidential document discoveries was sought by museums, universities, and government agencies throughout the United States. The career change provided greater income and professional satisfaction, while utilizing skills that Maria had developed through her restaurant management background and her experience managing complex projects with multiple stakeholders. The family. Security that Maria achieved through her discovery included not only financial resources, but also the knowledge that Sophia's medical needs would always be met and that their family would never again face the poverty and instability that had threatened. Their survival before the Saloon renovation revealed the presidential document collection. The transformation of their circumstances exceeded anything that Maria could have imagined during the desperate months when financial collapse had seemed inevitable and Sophia's future had appeared uncertain. The historical recognition that Maria received included honorary positions with major historical organizations and awards from presidential libraries that acknowledged her contribution to American historical understanding and preservation. The historical honors reflected recognition that her discovery and subsequent advocacy had advanced scholarly knowledge of presidential history while demonstrating how ordinary citizens could contribute to historical preservation and public education. About American political development, the international attention that Maria's discovery attracted included interest from foreign historians and international museums studying American presidential history and its influence on global political and environmental policies. The international recognition led to consulting opportunities and speaking engagements in Europe and Asia, where her experience was relevant for understanding American political development and its impact on international relations during the early 20th century. The legal precedents that were established through Maria's case created frameworks for managing future discoveries of presidential materials on private property, while protecting both historical preservation interests and property rights. The legal arrangements that were developed provided models for similar situations while ensuring that individuals who discovered historically significant materials would be fairly compensated for their cooperation with preservation authorities and historical research institutions. The museum's success that resulted from Maria's discovery and subsequent management attracted over 180,000 visitors annually to the Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Research Center, generating substantial tourism revenue for Montana while providing educational opportunities for students and researchers studying American presidential history. The museum's success exceeded all projections and established Silver Creek as a major destination for presidential history tourism throughout the western United States. 5 years after discovering the presidential document collection beneath her inherited Saloon's floorboards, Maria Santos had become one of the most respected figures in American historical preservation while maintaining her role as Sophia's devoted mother and primary advocate for her continued health and happiness. The transformation of her life represented one of the most dramatic reversals of fortune in contemporary American history, proving that extraordinary opportunities could be hidden beneath the most ordinary and unpromising circumstances. The vindication that Maria experienced included recognition that her desperate decision to accept the Saloon inheritance, despite universal expert advice against the decision, had been the most historically significant property acquisition in Montana history. The building that contractors had warned would bankrupt her had instead provided financial security that would last for generations, while contributing to presidential historical understanding and American cultural preservation. The inspiration that Maria's story provided for other individuals facing desperate circumstances demonstrated that persistence, courage, and willingness to explore unconventional possibilities could lead to discoveries that transformed not only personal situations, but contributed to advancing historical knowledge and cultural preservation for all Americans. The universal appeal of Maria's story reflected fundamental hopes about the potential for individual determination to create positive change, even in the most challenging circumstances. The legacy that Maria created through her discovery extended far beyond her family's financial transformation to contribute to American understanding of presidential history, environmental policy development, and the political relationships that shaped Western American development during a critical period in the nation's growth. The lasting impact of her discovery would influence historical scholarship and public education about American political development for generations, while inspiring others to value and preserve historical materials that might otherwise be lost. Today, the Roosevelt Presidential Research Center continues to attract researchers and visitors from around the world, while providing ongoing income for Maria's family that has transformed their lives beyond anything they could have imagined during the desperate months when homelessness seemed inevitable and Sophia's cancer treatment appeared financially impossible. The center represents one of the most successful examples of how historical discoveries can provide both personal transformation and cultural preservation through responsible management of historically significant resources. The ultimate vindication that Maria received through her discovery proved that sometimes the most desperate decisions made in circumstances that seem hopeless can lead to opportunities that transform not only individual lives, but contribute to advancing historical understanding and cultural preservation for all citizens. Her story demonstrates that extraordinary potential can be hidden in the most ordinary places, waiting for discovery by people who have the courage to explore possibilities that others dismiss as impossible or worthless. And that maternal love and determination can lead to discoveries that preserve American history for future generations. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.